Welcome to the Private Practice Pro podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping therapists cultivate success. Here's your host, Kelley Stevens.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Private Practice Pro podcast. I'm so excited to have our guest here, Ryan Schwartz. And Ryan, I'm going to go ahead and have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you, and then also a little bit about Mental Health Match.
Well, thanks, Kelley. I'm so excited to be here. I am really passionate about supporting independent therapists. And before I got into Mental Health Match, I was actually a communications professional that really helped figure out how do we communicate with audiences in ways that help us connect with them and move them to actually take action. And so a lot of what I do with Mental Health Match is based off of all of that experience. And I'm really thrilled to be able to share that with your listeners and with your audience today. Mental Health Match is kind of a modern therapist directory where we're really focused on the fit between client and therapist. So we survey clients about their needs, and we have a matching algorithm that helps match them with clinicians who are a really good fit. It helps make sure that you get referrals, and not just any referrals, but referrals that are a really good fit for your practice, the exact type of clients that you like to work with.
Yeah, I mean, Mental Health Match, I was telling you off camera kind of before we started this, I just polled my private Facebook group asking therapists, like, which directories are working for you? And it was funny because like every single comment was like, Mental Health Match, Mental Health Match, Mental Health Match. And, I think like all of us as therapists sign up for all these different directories, not necessarily knowing which ones are going to actually work. And the proof is in the pudding, right? If your phone rings, then you know that a directory is working for you. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And that's okay. And I usually tell people like give it a few months and that sort of thing. But it's funny how often your name actually comes up in all of my like private Facebook messages and from therapists. So I'm really thankful that you took the time to be here. And I think also like so many of these directory companies for us to like as therapists sometimes feel like kind of this black box, like what's the secret sauce, And it's nice to be able to talk to someone who like can really pull the curtain and be like, okay, here's what tends to do well and what doesn't. Because as therapists, we don't always know,
Yeah, and one of the things that makes me laugh is like I call them the theories about like, for example, Psychology Today and like how to get to the top of their page results and like all of the things that people say you have to do. And I'm happy to be able to share like how we work at Mental Health Match and what we've learned along the way makes for a really great profile.
Yeah, I've heard some like really funny theories, like the number of times you log in, or like how much if you tweak some information, like you name it. Like I have therapists DMing me the funniest things. So I'm like, I'm pretty sure that doesn't work. But the truth is, I don't know. I don't own the direct, So, okay, so let's get started just with what do you notice are like the common characteristics that tend to cause therapist directories to rank higher on your platform?
Yeah. So I kind of like add some nuance to that question. So
yes,
ranking for us is a algorithm that helps match the client's needs with what the clinical specialties are, like the clinician's background. And so there's no trick to ranking higher on our site. It's all about the match. If the client is looking for, a Black DBT therapist who specializes in trauma, and you meet those needs, you will be shown as the match.
Right.
And so there's no tricks there. It's really about creating that connection and making sure that match is really good. But what we do see is that there are some common characteristics of profiles that actually convert clients a lot better. So you might show as a match, but if your profile isn't delivering what the client is looking for, they might move on to their second match or their third match.
Right.
And so for that, and these I think are tips that are useful no matter what directory you're on, even for your website, for any ways that you present yourself online. And we've kind of found that there are three big things that really set profiles apart. And to get there, I think it's really important to step back and put yourself in the shoes of potential clients. Potential clients are overwhelmed.
Yeah.
They're uncertain. And they feel alone, right? And that's why they're reaching out for help. And what they're looking for is a sense of connection with a potential therapist and a sense of hope that you're going to be able to help move them from where they're at to someplace that is better. And what we've seen is that the best performing profiles have found ways to offer that feeling of connection and hope. And you also have to remember that more than half of traffic looking for a therapist is on a cell phone. People are doing this. Maybe they're at home and they're doing it. They don't necessarily want their partner to know, or they're at work. They don't want their coworkers to know, right?
Right.
And so they're doing this on their cell phone. And so it's really important that profiles are really easy to take a look at and to scan. And we'll talk a little bit about that too, I'm sure. But the three biggest tips that we have found for profiles that do really well, the first is that they offer what we call words of hope. There can be a tendency to focus on just the problems. Are you sad and
depressed and anxious,
tired and depressed? And those don't work so well. That's not what people are looking for. They know that they're feeling sad and anxious, right? What they want to know is what you can do to offer them hope. And so words like, heal, relieve, improve, like these are the solutions, the words of hope. That's what folks look for. And when profiles focus mostly on those types of words, rather than the problems, we see that they do really well.
Wow.
The second thing is like words of connection. So, and that's like the we's and the togethers, right? You're just creating a connection with the person and helping them see that you can do something
interesting.
together.
I never would have thought of that.
Yeah. And so a lot of profiles, they focus on you. They use a lot of yous, like you need this, or you looking for this. And those can be helpful. But we see that the best profiles talk about we. And together we will do these things. Together we will help you relieve what you're feeling, learn new skills.
Yeah. I mean,
right?
So
it was super interesting.
So when you guys did this, because obviously you had to go into your data and look at this, was that something I wouldn't necessarily have thought of that nuance? Was that something that surprised you?
It was definitely surprising.
Yeah.
And we saw that there was like a nuance around using the word you. So the profiles that didn't do so well often use you to associate with problems, and they end up being very triggering. Like, are you struggling with alcohol? Are you addicted to sex? Like, these things are often very triggering when somebody is feeling overwhelmed already or shame. That type of sentence can just kind of create an emotional response that makes them move to the next profile. So what we found is like talking about problems in third person. So I specialize in working with clients who struggle with alcohol. And together, we can help you learn other coping skills or learn to address these things and improve your life or whatever. So that was really, really fascinating to look at.
So you say that again. So I specialize in working with clients who struggle with da-da-da. It's so interesting because in like typical marketing and sales, we often do the opposite, right? Like we want to get like, are you somebody who is looking to build a private practice? Would be my, like we're more direct, but I can totally see how taking a more passive voice in this stance would be a good thing. That's interesting.
Right. And it helps meet the clients where they're at and not overwhelm them, like especially around issues where there's a lot of shame and vulnerability. It can be really hard for clients to like see that reflected back at them, and they get a little, they feel that anxiety. And so using those words of hope, the solutions focus, right? And then words of connection, and then really just everyday language is super important. So, when I was doing communications work, we would talk about the curse of knowledge, which is that once you know something, it's really hard to remember what it's like to not know that. And so, you've gone through years of schooling, like, you know what Rogerian therapy is, right? Like, you know what person-centered therapy, like that means something to you. But for like 99% of clients, that doesn't mean anything. And so dropping kind of that jargon and finding ways to really communicate with some simple words that that folks understand more.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I see that so often on therapist profiles, just like how you approach a psychodynamic, systemic, and you're like, I have no idea what you even just said. And even as a therapist, sometimes I'm like, I'm not exactly sure what you're trying to accomplish here,
Totally. Especially when there's such a long list of things. And so, we always encourage folks to kind of get rid of all of that jargon and just speak in that everyday language. Like, what does that mean for your client's experience? Like, what do they need to know about that?
Oh, that's good. Yeah. All three of those things are things that I don't know are natural to all of us when we write these profiles,
Totally. It can be very overwhelming to write a profile, right? And so we found that these few tips kind of help frame that a little bit better for folks.
What about, can you tell us, Ryan, let's talk about headshots. Because I think people dread the headshot. What makes a good therapist profile headshot?
Yeah, so it's important. It's actually really important. When we sit down and do user tests with people looking for a therapist, the headshot can be make or break. And I think that that's unfortunate. I've always wanted to play around with like hiding headshots at first and see what that does.
Then people would have to read. They might just click off the site in general. Yeah.
It is, but it is really important. And it's part of making a connection with somebody. The good news is you don't have to be fancy. You don't have to hire somebody, although having like the right equipment can help, but it isn't a hard one to figure out. So what we learned about headshots when we look at profiles that do really well compared to profiles that don't are that the number one most important thing is that when a viewer looks at your headshot, they meet your eyes, that there's eye contact.
Oh, interesting.
And so, it's all about that eye contact. And so what we find is that when there's a whole lot of busyness in the background, if there's like neon lights or big cityscapes or whatever, and your eyes are going to that versus the therapist's eyes, those don't do so well. Or if there's like shadows that cover your face, or you're wearing glasses and there's big glare or hair, those things don't do well either. So it really is about just making eye contact and not having a lot of distractions in the background.
Interesting. I often see ones where people are kind of artistic and they're kind of like looking off, and I think that too, like, not so sure you should be looking off. I think you need to be looking right at the client, but I never thought of it like that. That's great.
Because their clients are looking for that connection, right? They're not looking for the artistic stance. They're not looking for your creativity. They're looking for the way that you connect with them.
Right.
And like the way that you approach the photo kind of matters. So we often see like when photos are taken kind of from the ground up and the therapist is kind of looking down, it doesn't feel good. It's not what you don't want your therapist like looking down at you, right? Like we associate that with kind of like a power dynamic or something, or if like their arms are crossed and they're looking down, those really don't do so well. And so it's really about just kind of eye level, looking at the camera, making eye contact. So if you're taking a photo, just pretend you're in this therapy room with somebody and you're looking through that camera lens right into their eyes, and helping them feel safe and vulnerable. And that headshot will do really well.
That's good to know. And what about in terms of, because you guys do video too, right? So what about for videos?
Yeah, I think what's interesting about videos is that we find they help profiles convert more. So like somebody, so profiles with videos, clients will often just contact the therapist right there from the profile page because they get a sense of who they are.
Right.
Without a video, they're more likely to click on a link to your website because they're looking for more information.
They're looking for a video.
Sold. Yeah. They're looking for a video, right? They want to know more about who you are.
Yeah.
And so that, depending on what your website is like, you always lose some people in the process. Like they'll open your website and then forget about it, or they'll start reading and get lost and unsure. So videos are really helpful just to like make that connection right there and kind of move that person to the next step of their process.
Right.
But if videos are done really poorly, they can hurt, right? So again, if there's lots of distractions, or if you make it, like some off-putting statements, right? If you're not thoughtful and intentional about the video, if you kind of just like shoot it and speak off the top of your head and don't know what comes out and don't edit, like they could actually be more harmful. So it's really important to approach a video with the same kind of intention that you would a headshot and a profile text.
Do you suggest that people hire someone to help them with their video or not so much?
This is just me, but my first answer to folks is never to go spend money if they don't need to, right? I like having somebody with the proper equipment can be really helpful. Having somebody with experience with editing and scripting can help make sure that you come across the way you intend to. But it's not required. Like you can set up your phone on a tripod or something and just, or even have a friend hold it for a minute and have a little script, know what you're going to say.
The iPhone camera is pretty good now. It's amazing. Like the iPhone 13 or whatever, I feel like this camera is so good.
Yeah, for sure. And I think part of it with all of like the headshots and the videos, it's also important to know who you're trying to speak with. So if you work primarily with like teens or young adults, you're going to want to come across a little bit differently than if you're primarily working with, C-suite CEOs, business executives. And so you might dress differently. You might talk differently. And it's just important to keep that in mind. If your audience is used to really highly polished videos, you might want to hire somebody.
Yeah.
But hiring somebody to make you seem really fancy when your audience is teens might actually be worse, right?
Yeah, they might not actually click on it. So yeah, I think it's interesting. I wonder, and this is kind of an off-topic question, but when you are seeing therapists that work with teens, do you think it's the parents that are often going and looking at the profiles, or do you think it's the teenager?
It's a really good question. So with younger adolescents, we know it's the parents.
Yeah.
With teenagers, we actually get a mix. Like it's more of a mix. It is often parents.
Yeah.
But I think teenagers get like a final say, and oftentimes we do get teenagers themselves who are looking. So yeah, it's not clear.
Kind of a mix.
We've looked at that a little bit. Yeah. And it really is a mix. But we also know that like for couples therapists, for couples therapists with in heterosexual relationships, it is oftentimes the woman who is looking for both. So
I was going to ask you that question next, and because I think one thing we talk a lot about in my courses and just in work in general is like the messaging is so important. Our words matter when we're trying to get a client's attention, and we have often only a few seconds to convince them essentially that we're the right fit for them, and I think knowing who is looking at directories, whether you're a couples therapist or targeting teens, is important. Definitely.
It's super important.
Hey, therapists. Are you listening to the show and thinking, I really want to launch my own private practice, but I have no idea where to start? Make sure to check out Kelley's Private Practice Roadmap course. In the course, Kelley gives you the exact steps you need to open your own thriving practice. You can find the link below in the show notes.
Do you have any tips for therapists? Like, oftentimes I see these massive profiles that are just blocks and blocks of text. In terms of the actual writing, what do you see that seems to be most helpful?
Yeah, so I'll say our data is a little bit biased here because at Mental Health Match, we actually have prompts that we've developed by talking to lots of folks looking for clients. And then we put word counts on them to prevent big blocks of text because we know it actually doesn't work.
Right.
Remember, I think it's 65% of traffic coming to our site is mobile.
Right.
And so there's just not room to dive in with big blocks of text. And especially when somebody is on their cell phone and they're scrolling, we have patterns of what that feels like to us when we're scrolling. Right. And so and that pattern is if you come across a big block of text that feels inaccessible, you just keep scrolling.
Right.
And the same thing happens. It doesn't matter if you're looking for a therapist or just scrolling through Facebook. You have a default pattern when you have a phone in your hand and you're just scrolling. So we do limit the amount of words. And I think it's really important to make it easily scannable. So even if you do want to put a lot of words in, 1 to 2 sentence paragraphs and then line breaks in between.
Right.
And you really want to use some keywords that are going to jump out. Keywords about people, like populations you work with, identity-based keywords, as well as like specific emotions or presenting issues. Those types of keywords are really going to jump out at folks.
What about typos? How often do you see typos in your profiles?
I'm a trained copy editor, so I see lots of typos. But, and to be honest though, like unless there's a lot of them are very egregious, or unless the audience is sensitive to things like that, again, like business executives, most of them don't, if you have a little typo, it's not too bad. I mean, proofread your profile for sure, right? But if you have a little bit of typo, like it's not, we don't actually see that. It's
not a make or
big of a
break.
deal.
Yeah.
It's not a make or break. But again, it does depend on your audience, and what kind of language that you're using to reach them. So
I feel like that's something that in creating Instagram content, we have to create so much written content. And even just today, I had a huge typo. But then once you put it all out there and you have a bunch of comments and the post is going, you can't just change it, So today on the top of mine, I wrote like in the caption, I was like, I can see the typo, but I'm not deleting this. I'm so sorry or something, but people like to call it out. Let me tell you.
I'm sure they do, but you know what? We're human. And that's like, I think it's okay. It's even just like to show that you're human. But, if you are talking about how detail oriented you are and you like to work with perfectionists, and then maybe it's not okay to have a typo.
Yeah, that's fair. What else? I'm trying to think if there's any other areas we haven't talked about within the profile. Do you have any other kind of last tips or anything that you think we forgot to cover?
I think it's important to talk about niches. So do you say niche or niche?
Oh my God. Welcome to I don't know. This is like the most stressful part of my whole job. So I used to say niche because it makes sense to me, like, a little niche, But then I was on Instagram World and everyone's like, it's niche. So what do you call it? I don't know. I switch it up.
I've been corrected both ways. So
Me too.
I like niche. It's like a little bit softer. It sounds a little, let's go with niche.
Let's talk about niche.
Let's talk about niches. It's super important. It's part of what makes people feel like you're a fit for them, right? So like some of the worst performing profiles we see are like, I see clients ages 8 to 88 and who are dealing with like life transition, stress, trauma, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, people see that and they immediately think like this person's not, they don't see themselves reflected in that kind of a statement.
Right.
So it's really important. There's lots of ways you could do it. You can be a generalist and still niche by population, right?
Oh, got it.
So, maybe you see a number of issues that are primarily affecting young women, or like new parents returning to work. These are the things you can kind of niche around that. Or maybe you're new and you don't want to make that kind of commitment. You can still create a profile around a niche and change it up every few months to keep experimenting to find what you're interested in. But presenting a niche on a profile, we have found to be very, very important. It really helps clients feel a sense of fit, and feel reflected in what you're saying. Yeah. And I think if this is especially true when you're new as a therapist and you're newly licensed, if you present yourself, it's already difficult to kind of prove your expertise because you're new. And so one of the biggest mistakes we see newer therapists make is kind of presenting as that overly broad generalist who can help anyone with anything. Right. And maybe it's true, but it's not about the truth of that. It's about the marketing aspect of things. Right. So it's really important to kind of present one way, and then you can change that in a couple months to try something different, but really try to connect with who the clients are and reflect them. Yeah. However, this is like a Goldilocks thing, right? Because it's also harmful to go too narrow that people feel excluded, right? So, for example, we were doing some tests of so all of this research started, and we looked at kind of the data, and then we wanted to test our ideas. So we worked with a few therapists to help rewrite their profile and see what difference it made.
Yeah.
And so, for example, we worked with a couples therapist who was talking about how they help couples explore open relationships. And we just thought that might be too narrow. And so we kind of backed out a little bit and said, like, what if you just say you help couples explore intimacy and sexuality?
Right.
Like a step back from like the narrowness. And that really helped actually increase the number of clients that they were getting. And so it is like a Goldilocks problem.
Right.
There is both too broad and too narrow.
Yeah.
And so it's important to kind of like find that balance and again, play with it. If you think you're too narrow, step back a little bit. And then if it ends up being not getting you the results you want, try going back in and just play with it a little bit.
I think that's a good example though, because you're not helping that, like, I think you kind of put it the perfect way with saying like, we're helping them with intimacy, or I forget what you exactly, but you just stepped it one step back. What I see people do is like, they don't want to be super niche. So they take all the steps back and they're like, I treat anxiety and depression and codependency. And, they just list and list and list. Which, it's like finding that perfect middle spot, and that sweet spot's important.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the laundry list don't do anything for connection, right?
Nothing. When I read those, even like when I'm looking for a therapist on somebody's profile, to me, it just reads as like, you're an expert in nothing, And like, I always think people like when you're really struggling in a really challenging part of your life, you want to know that you're going to someone that can say, I've seen other people with this. Like, I know how to walk you through this, versus like one of my other clients one time was that,
Totally. There's like a communications saying, like if you try to speak to everyone, you end up speaking to no one.
Yeah.
Because you're so broad that it just doesn't resonate. I think that's like exactly what happens in cases like that.
Oh, totally. I could not agree more. 100%. What else, Ryan? What else did we not cover about being an amazing therapist profile?
I'm going to recap. Let's make sure we cover the thing. So it's a headshot that makes eye contact. It is having a defined niche that is not too broad, but not too narrow. It is focusing on words of hope so that what you're actually creating for people. It's avoiding triggering folks if there's issues around shame and whatever they're experiencing. So being careful about how you use the word you instead of switching to third person. Like my client, I specialize in working with people who blank. It's words of connection. So fewer I's and more we's and togethers. It's breaking through that jargon and kind of simplifying it as much as possible. I think those are the biggest ones.
And proofread your work. Typos are not the worst thing in the world, but proofread your work.
But proofread it. Yeah. And, I used to have like, when I was doing communications work, I would have what I called my Aunt Cindy test. So I have my Aunt Cindy. She has worked in retail all her life. And I would write something and I would just like text it to her and say like, hey, Aunt Cindy, what works here? And what what do you understand and what do you not understand? And I recommend everybody find their own Aunt Cindy test.
I send everything to my mother-in-law. Every single thing.
Yes.
Like if it's important, number one, she's an amazing proofreader. Okay. But other than that, she'll be like, only a therapist will understand this. Like, I don't know what you're talking about, And I think that's so helpful. That's such a good tip.
Yeah, absolutely. You send it to somebody who's not clinically trained and get feedback from them.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so Ryan, where can people find more information about Mental Health Match? How do they kind of get connected?
So mentalhealthmatch.com, that's the website. And I believe in the show notes and in the notes for the course, there is a special offer for Private Practice Pro community about how to join for free and get a long free trial with us to experience Mental Health Match. We're also on Instagram at Mental Health Match. That's our primary platform for social media.
Yeah.
And you can always email us, info@mentalhealthmatch.com. You will get an answer from a real human as quickly as possible.
Love it.
We are real humans, so we like to connect with folks.
Well, and I love that. I think that free trial time is a good time for people to practice some of these strategies that we're telling you. You're going to have this free time. So you might as well log in and try to like re-listen to this a few different times and really implement what we're talking about. I think that's a good challenge for everyone.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to play with it. It's not like you're signing up for 4 years of grad school with your profile, right? Like it's not a big commitment. Try playing with it a little bit to
Tweak it.
see if it's working. One of the cool things about that we do is we send every month, every therapist gets like a data email. And so
Oh, interesting.
it says like, okay, here's the issues that people are looking for when they land on your profile. Like 80% of people landing on your profile are looking for trauma, 20% are looking for relationships. Here's
Interesting.
the data about people converting. Oh, it's like, it's mostly relationships. It's not of the trauma folks, but you've got a lot of trauma folks coming to your profile, but they're not converting the same way. You might want to think about your profile.
Oh,
and
that's
how
so helpful. I didn't
addresses
know
trauma.
that. That's amazing. That is so
Yeah.
helpful.
So
Amazing.
we want to help you play with your profile too and
Yeah,
experiment
keep
and try new things.
tweaking. I mean, always. I feel like that's like the key to marketing. Keep listening to the people that are coming to you, So, well, Ryan, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here. And maybe we'll have to have a part 2 in a few months or something. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. I'm so happy that you're here for your community and providing the service because it's so hard to start a private practice.
It is.
And you're such a great resource for folks.
Thank you. This podcast is sponsored by Simple Practice. I've been using Simple Practice since 2016, which has helped me run a smooth and profitable private practice over the years. It has simplified everything from scheduling to billing, giving me a better balance between the work I'm so passionate about and the family time I'm not willing to miss out on. Check out the episode notes to get a free 2-month trial of Simple Practice, my preferred all-in-one HIPAA-compliant solution. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ask Kelley Anything. We have a juicy question today that I actually got on Instagram, not on voicemail, but I wanted to answer it anyway, so let me tell you what it is. This person says, "Hi, I love your content. It's been so helpful to me in my career as a social worker. I was just wondering if you could comment on a post about an article I saw recently about the prospect of AI taking over therapy. Also, services threatening what we do by providing cheaper and cheaper services that would inevitably be more appealing to insurance. I hope this doesn't happen, but it's a scary prospect. I love your content and I would love to know your thoughts. Thank you so much." All right, I am getting a lot of these messages in my inbox in various forms, right? Email, TikTok, whatever. And I've created a little bit of content on this on Instagram, but I really wanted to address this in my podcast because I think it's triggering a lot of therapists' fear. So at the time when this episode's coming out, there's been a lot in the media about ChatGPT and other AI services. And there's been some creators out there that have posted content about, typing therapy type questions into an AI service and getting some results and feeling better from them. Now, I don't have any concrete research on the efficacy of AI therapy. I don't have any studies to cite for you. And so this answer is purely my own opinion. But what I would say is this. 1, I do not believe it is possible to replicate the experience of sitting face to face with another human being and them saying, "I hear you, I see you, and I understand." Because at the very end of the day, when clients, let's say a client was to type in how to work through my depression into ChatGPT or at any other search engine, they're going to get an answer that comes from the internet. And that might be a really good answer, right? Because the way that AI works is it kind of pools the whole internet, and I'm not a tech person, so this is probably going to be sounding wrong, and gets the best of the answers that are out there, right? But the thing that it doesn't do is it doesn't provide another human being. And time again, studies have shown that the most important part of therapy that shows the best client outcomes is the relationship between the therapist and the client, right? We know that that's what determines the best outcomes. And in order for that to happen, that person needs to be a human being. So one other question that this person asked was, what do I think about insurance companies using this or thinking that this is going to be cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, right? Yes, we know that insurance companies are notorious for cutting corners, right? We know that insurance companies are notorious for cutting cost.
I have to believe for myself and for my own sanity and humanity that at the end of the day, insurance companies have to go with the research. So number one, there has to be a lot more research on AI therapy, on ChatGPT, and all these other different platforms before anything ever gets implemented, number one. Number two, it's our job as therapists and also as consumers of mental health services and as healthcare providers to really advocate for what is the best care for our clients. That's so often why I talk to people about some of the pitfalls of taking insurance or the pitfalls of lowering our fee or providing services that don't necessarily meet our ethics or something like that, because it's our job as therapists to provide the highest level of ethics and to advocate for our clients. So I would say if you see an insurance company that is trying AI therapy, write letters, write to your Congress people, take a stand against it. But at the end of the day, if you were to ask me and we were sitting at coffee, if I'm worried that AI is going to take over therapy, I'm not. Not at all. I hope this helps.
If you would like to be featured on Ask Kelley Anything, I love getting listener questions from you guys. Anything about private practice goes. And the best way to do that is actually just to give me a call and leave me a question on my voicemail. So I'm going to tell you the phone number right now and make sure to write it down. Here it is. 805-243-8241. I'm looking forward to hearing from you.